Here I am in the Permian Basin, that ancient interior seaway where ancient sea life from the grass and the coral reefs all collected at the bottom of our earth to make that nice black sludge that powers our lifestyles. In your car, keeping your home cool in the winter and your home nice and warm in the summer. All of the goods that you eat from overseas and traveling on the highway systems to get to you, all of it comes from right here underneath my feet in this desert. Also calling home this desert are countless indigenous tribes, like the Anasazi, the ancient culture that built the ruins in Chaco Canyon that we're about to head to. Chaco Canyon is the most ancient stone city that we have preserved in the United States. It was built sometime in 800 AD, and for hundreds of years, for centuries, this was the center of the Chaco culture. Today, we know them and the sites ranging from Mesa Verde all the way to Texas as the Anasazi. This is the ancient Pueblonian peoples. This is where the Hopi, the Zuni, the folks up in Taos, this is where all of the cultures from here all the way down to the Tiwa Pueblos touching Mexico, this is where they come from. So this is what we have to preserve here. And we've done a lot of work. All of these kind of fixtures to the buildings, these are brand new in order so that when it rains and when things happen, we do our best to preserve it. What is threatening that right now? What's threatening it is Donald Trump and the conservative movement to try to reduce protections and drill underneath this earth. It is harmful, and geologists tell us that it harms the water, harms the wildlife, and overall, it's not something that we want in this part of our community, in this part of our state here in New Mexico.
Our lawmakers representing us in D.C. have been pushing back on what they say is the Trump administration's attack on public lands.
And the latest target, the land surrounding Chaco Canyon. The administration wants to remove protections around the National Historic Park in northwest New Mexico to allow oil, gas, and mining projects.
A World Heritage Site in New Mexico may be subject to mining and drilling. Tonight, the federal government says it has completed a review of the future of Chaco Canyon.
Aaliyah Chavez joins us now in studio after speaking with stakeholders on both sides.
Yeah, good evening, Shelley. Doug, 3 years ago, the Biden administration issued a sweeping order banning new oil and gas development around Chaco for 20 years. It's a 10-mile perimeter around the park called a buffer zone. Now, the Trump administration says those protections could be rolled back, and soon.
The Land of Enchantment hosts the most prolific oil and gas properties on BOM in the entire country.
This is the substance that is so important underneath this ancient ocean. All of this oil underneath the ground is what everyone is fighting over. It's why the Trump administration wants to reduce the protection for this great land. It's why the Navajo want to be able to drill in this 10-mile area. Besides the Clovis culture, which is the oldest culture here in New Mexico from 20,000 years ago, this is the most ancient archaeological site that we have of a city and complex society building something here in North America, where now the United States is. Built in 800 AD, this is one of the oldest societies in the United States. But not all cultures here in New Mexico have been here as long as these guys. The Apache cultures, Havasupai, and Navajo, the Dene, they all came here around the 1000 AD, a couple hundred years after this society was already thriving. This is the place where these two cultures started to have conflict and differentiate themselves between Askabathan, Anasazi, which would become the rivalry of the Navajo and the Pueblos and the Hopis. This is where we get today's conflict. Behind me is a cultural site mostly significant to the Hopi and to the Pueblo. But the problem is it is closest to Navajo Nation's territory, which they're now using to exploit the oil in this region. The big issue is that this is a Pueblo site, and the people who want to drill under it are Navajo. And that gives us a really complicated answer with President Boo Nygren. Now, we've already taken a look in this channel about the conflicts between Askabathan societies and Anasazi societies. We've looked at conflict between the Hopi Nation and the Navajo Nation in Arizona going on right now. You see, the two cultures share a lot of the same ancestry, and they both have religions tied to this very land. But because of the difference in the way their cultures have developed, their very rivalry with each other has meant that these ancient sites, like the one next to me, are at constant threat due to the politics and, more importantly, the precious minerals that our government and corporations want beneath my feet. This ancient landscape that became home to ancient kingdoms is now at the center of controversy because the Trump administration wants to reduce the protections that happen all around this place. And whether or not you actually believe in the minerals that we need and the process that we go through to mine them in sites like this one thing has to be certain. This explains who we are as Americans and the conflicts we see in our society today. And trying to reduce the protections because we want a little money, well, that's capitalism. And that's what we've always seen. And it's nothing new.
If you're going to take a job from somebody or money from somebody, you should have a plan to replace it. And in this case, that plan wasn't provided, which to me is very disrespectful. And at the same time, one of the things that we forget to think about is Chaco is surrounded by the Navajo Nation. And the Navajo Nation has been protecting Chaco for hundreds of years. Chaco would not be where it is today if Navajo people didn't live there, didn't protect that, didn't have ceremonies, didn't honor it. So for people to question how we feel about Chaco is very disrespectful to us. We've been doing it for hundreds of years, and as I mentioned in my testimony, and into the future and forever, we will continue to protect Chaco because Chaco sits within the boundaries of the Navajo Nation. And then the only part was you're taking money from poor people. So how do you replace that opportunity?
And sites like this one, that were built sometime between 800 AD and 1000 AD, is when we first get the evidence of the Puebloan peoples here in the Anasazi culture. The Anasazi culture was then accompanied by the Apaches and the Navajo and the Havasupai, who in Askabathan migrations came from Alaska through the Great Plains into this region. It's for these reasons that you can't get a DNA test in Navajo Nation to test your ancestry. It is illegal for any tribal member of Navajo Nation to use their own blood to do ancestry work to see if this is actually true. But we've been able to use Apache DNA in order to understand that yes, the Askabathan migration happened, and the Navajo and Apache societies are from around 1000 AD, where they were able to come to this region. But this extremely controversial point is still illegal in Navajo Nation, and it's part of the deep rivalry of the two peoples. Life in this part of the world was brutal. Living in this climate is brutal, and the cultures that lived here were equally as brutal. But a lot of evidence gives us the belief that the Pueblo societies that are around New Mexico today were much more likely the victims of this culture than they were the direct descendants of the Anasazi. The Anasazi were small, cults, and really intense ritualistic group of people who are able to build these megastructures. We still don't quite know their origins. How much connection do they have to the Maya and the Totonacan and the rest of Central America's cultures? But what we do know is what went on here was pretty brutal. We find bodies that were chopped up with sharp stone tools. We find the bone marrow scraped out and cooked. I've seen people who say that it's cannibalism. I see people who say it's just mass ritualistic torture and sacrifice. Whatever happened, it happened here for quite a long time and was extremely brutal. And this gives us some of the best insight into the most brutal societies that existed in our country today. They have evolved into some pretty dynamic cultures. There are now over a dozen pueblos that spot all around New Mexico and would travel into Mexico, travel into Colorado. And this is where these cultures come from. This is where a lot of the pottery and the things that white people like to buy for themselves take home. This is the culture that developed all of that. In the ancient world, things were different. This is when the medieval period was happening in Europe. It was brutal there too. This is what it's like living in New Mexico in the year 1800 AD. These things were, they were very different. And we're very lucky to still have this history preserved. But it's under threat because, again, capitalism wants the resources under this megastructure. The history is in this place. And we're still trying to figure out who's who, when did it happen, and who were these people that we have the remains of today. Preserving this site has already proven to be a pretty big challenge. In the 1800s, a massive lightning storm knocked this cliff face into the site, destroying a lot of the buildings. It's really difficult to preserve it, especially when corporations want to start drilling in the land around this and suck up all of the oil, which will damage the water supply here, affecting local communities, but also just posing a greater risk to the tranquility of this natural environment. This is the oldest place that we have to look at these ancient conflicts between the Navajo and the Pueblo societies. Now that these are issues that we have to deal with in the country today, it's worth looking at the history and why it's so terrible that the Trump administration is going after these kind of historic sites. What's the history here? What's it all about? My name is Thomas Abeda. I am a student journalist at the University of New Mexico. I'm a filmmaker, and I am currently trying to make this very small video documentary about what Chaco Canyon is, what it means to the culture of our nation, and what kind of forces are threatening it right now.
My name is Nick Kasparian. I am a student at the UNM Journalism and Communication Department, and I have been a filmmaker, photographer, and writer for a good majority of my life at this point. I've been trying to figure out how to kind of take my, visual and, linguistic interests into issues of storytelling that are compelling and matter to me, and I'm continuing on that journey later into my 20s now.
My name is Frank. I am a filmmaker and a graduate of the Institute of American Indian Arts. Well, I've had an interest in film since I was a kid. I did video production in high school, so I've been making stuff since then. I started film school in 2018, and more recently I got my bachelor's. I took some time off.
I've always been interested in taking pictures and using digital cameras since I was a kid, and I got some for Christmas, and I always kind of made a point to invest in having a camera and carrying it with me to just preserve anything I thought was interesting or caught my attention. And over time I developed a sort of sense of what consistently was catching my interest, how to best frame that in best light of things, and I really find beauty and simplicity and symmetry, and I really try to make a lot of symmetry and a lot happen in my frames. It's funny how something like symmetry does not evade human history. We've gone back thousands of years and found the best balance in shapes to build things, to build our civilizations, and I thought the way in which that was preserved because of that integrity, architecturally gave a lot of story just to be able to bear witness, to be able to see with my own eyes something so, ahead of anything that I could perceive or understand to myself or my people. So, it felt like a privilege to get to honor that symmetrical value and the way it's been preserved to this day.
This story is really important to me because I think we don't get to look at the history of this country before whites came here and completely changed the entire dynamic of this continent. And this is one of the ancient feuds, a very dark period of history that we don't really get a lot of chances to look at very often. It's very sad that it is the source of so much conflict we have today, and it's very sad to see the historic sites like the one we just visited under constant threat.
Well, films are all about storytelling, and I think most people have some kind of innate sense of storytelling within them. Filmmaking is just like a different medium to sharpen that and to tell things visually in a way that's interesting and in a way that you can't really do in other mediums. It was my second time at Chaco Canyon, and the first time it was definitely a very vast place. It felt like I was taking in a lot of nuance of their architecture and getting a glimpse of the way they might have lived. But it was also it's kind of just invaluable to see something that's that old. It's in something that needs to persevere, because there's so many sites that are like, once like settlers came in initially, there's a lot of like old like documents and civilizations that were just completely wiped out. So to have anything left from that is an invaluable piece to keep in the culture, because it is the original culture.
I think there's a sense almost of it being like, you see a fresh sheet of snow out in the front yard or something, and it's so beautiful and almost unknown of, or especially think of maybe someone who had never seen snow before, and they see that, and you almost don't want to touch it or do anything, because of its fragility. But I think the invisibility, especially of these landscapes, some of these vast, surroundings of desert and beautiful natural wonder, that these artifacts are often based around, monuments, it's important to be able to recognize, both the fragility and the significance of being able to still have access to these places to see what their value holds up, and the fact that that it's a triumph of civilization in North America that has predated colonial times. And I think part of trying to erase that is trying to kind of rewrite history in a way that is very white and Western centric. So I feel my part in that is to sort of be somebody that's only of a family lived a few generations in America, to be able to see that and take privilege in it, and be able to reflect its value rather than its invisibility, or the fact of that being also its attempted erasure from the government and from Trump and the colonial efforts.
This was a really personal day for me to explore a forgotten civilization out in the middle of a canyon that is very hard to reach. And for me, as a Mexican American, as someone whose ancestry comes from the tribes of this region, north of where the border is, and all the way down to the Aztecs, it's hard for me to really explain what it's like to still have tangible pieces of this country's history.
Like I'm Apache, and I know a little bit about like the history of our beliefs, but I don't know as much as I'd like to. And there are definitely stories that I'd like to tell with that. I think it's a part rather than the whole. I think a trap with making it your whole identity is that it kind of encases you in like a time past, whereas like I think there needs to be like old and new ideas coming in, and for better or worse, like exchanging of different cultures and ideas is the way like people grow. And the best case scenario is when it's like not at the cost of losing one or the other.
The film you saw today was shot by Nicholas Kasparian, and all of the footage of us running around Navajo Nation and the Anasazi ruins was shot by Frank Dosela. I am incredibly thankful to these guys for helping me out, going out to the middle of nowhere constantly and filming us just doing nonsense, and really trying to get to the bottom of what's happening, because it's very difficult to wrap my own head around this state I live in of New Mexico and the surrounding place, and to have filmmakers like them who are willing to come with me to these places and tell these stories. I wouldn't be able to do it without them, and I'm very thankful that projects like this are possible, because filmmakers still care about telling good stories. The thing I really hope we understand after a film like we made today is that we need to protect these sites, and most especially we need to protect them from conservatives. We need to protect them from billionaires. We need to protect them from the elite of this country and its empire that is still destroying indigenous rights.